I met him on a rainy afternoon in the courtyard of the University of Manchester, a seemingly casual encounter that ended up changing the course of my life forever. My name is Emily, 22 years old, raised in a modest working-class household in Leeds. I was the only daughter in a family that prided itself on discipline, tradition, and the fear of scandal. My father, Mr. Richard Tran, a stern secondary school math teacher, lived by rigid rules and old moral codes. My mother, Mrs. Hannah Tran, was soft-spoken and gentle, but deeply susceptible to neighborhood gossip. From an early age, I was taught to walk the straight path. A girl must protect her reputation, my father often said. After university, we'll find you a respectable man to marry. I wasn't allowed to choose my degree. I loved journalism, but my parents forced me into mathematics because it was respectable and stable. We lived in a small terraced house where everyone knew everything. A whispered rumor next door would send my mother into a panic, and my father would lecture me as if I'd committed a crime. When I got into the University of Manchester to study mathematics, I thought I had finally escaped, but I never truly felt like I belonged in the subject. I worked part-time at a cafe and volunteered for events just to feel alive. One of those events was a startup summit. That's where I met him, James West. James looked like any ordinary student: jeans, a wrinkled shirt, and a warm smile that softened even the grayest Manchester sky. We connected quickly. We shared ideas, dreams, and most importantly, the same sense of personal responsibility. He never talked about his family, and I never asked. To me, James was simply someone who saw me for who I was, not who I was told to be. After a year of quietly dating, we took a trip to the Lake District. That night, under soft rain and whispered promises, I gave myself to him, not with plans or pressure, but with love. A month later, I found out I was pregnant. I panicked. I didn't tell James. He was busy building a new venture. I wanted to wait until the timing felt right. But life had its own timing. It started unraveling when a neighbor spotted me at a prenatal checkup. Rumors flared instantly. By the time I returned home, my father had already heard the worst. Twisted versions of truth. That I had slept around, that I had shamed the family. He didn't ask. He didn't yell. He simply slammed the medical report on the table and demanded, "What is this?" Before I could answer, his palm met my face. I cried, "Why are you doing this?" He shouted back, "You've disgraced this house." My mother cried in the corner. No one asked me how I felt. No one asked who the father was. No one asked if I was okay. They only saw shame, a stain to be scrubbed away. My father pointed to the door. "From this day forward, I have no daughter named Emily. Get out and never come back." I stepped out into the rain, carrying only a small suitcase and a growing heartbeat inside me. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know whom to call. And though I loved James, I felt too broken to reach out. The world suddenly felt too big, too cruel, and I felt far too small, too. I was the obedient daughter in my parents' eyes. until they discovered I was pregnant. They didn't ask who the father was. They didn't care if I was in love or forced. The only thing that mattered to them was, what will the neighbors say? A folded sonogram slipped from my wallet, and that was all it took for my world to collapse. My father, Mr. Richard Tran, slammed it on the table, eyes burning with fury. You're pregnant? With who? I've raised you for 22 years, and this is what you do? I stood frozen. Before I could say a word, he shouted, Get out! Out of this house! I have no daughter named Emily! My mother, Mrs. Hannah Tran, sat silently in tears, but said nothing in my defense. Her silence hurt more than his words. I clenched my fists, forcing my voice steady. I'll leave, but I won't abandon my child. No one stopped me. No one asked if I had money, a place to go, or even how I would survive. I dragged my suitcase past the gate as rain began to fall. The rain mixed with my tears, soaking away every trace of my youth. I once believed that if I was good, obedient, and respectful, my parents would always protect me. But one crack, one growing belly at the wrong time, was enough to erase my place in their home. From that day on, I lost everything: my home, their trust, even my name in the family registry. I wasn't anyone's daughter anymore, just a pregnant girl, abandoned, invisible in a city that never noticed I existed. No one ever taught me how to survive in a city that suddenly turns its back on you. No one warned me that London, the city I once dreamed of, could turn into a cold, cruel, and merciless trap. That night, after being thrown out of the house by my parents, I stepped into the rainy street with nothing but a suitcase, a nearly dead phone, and a few crumpled pounds in my wallet. Rain drizzled endlessly. I shivered, lost, with nowhere to go. No relatives, no close friends to turn to. My belly hadn't shown yet, but I could already feel the life growing inside me, and I knew I had to survive. I became invisible in the bustling crowd. I wandered the back streets of Camden and Shepherd's Bush, searching for the cheapest lodging. After a full day of dragging my feet, I found a dilapidated 10-square-meter room in a run-down council estate. No windows, no fan, moldy walls, rats scattered across the floor when I turned on the light. But it only cost $20 a week, the amount I could stretch for a short while. I ate dry instant noodles with hot water begged from a tea shop. No stove. I drank tap water and warmed milk powder with water from a corner store. That first night, I sat on the floor with my back to the wall, the only light coming from my phone's low power mode. I cried, not from pain, but from utter fear and helplessness. The next morning, I woke early and went job hunting. I got a spot at a pho stall run by a Vietnamese couple, working from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., serving bowls, cleaning tables, washing dishes. The smell of beef broth made me nauseous, but I pushed through. By noon, I took a short nap, then signed up to deliver food through an app using a motorbike borrowed from a fellow lodger after leaving my ID as collateral. At night, I tutored math online to 2 middle school students, earning about $6 per session. Every day was a battle. I counted every penny, planned each meal. Some days I ate only plain rice with sesame salt or stale, discounted bread. My belly grew tighter. Nausea hit me unpredictably. Once, I threw up at a traffic light. People stepped away as if I were contagious. I was exhausted, often dizzy, but I didn't allow myself to rest. Resting meant no money. No money meant no place to stay. No place to stay meant losing my child. In week 5, after being disowned, I began showing signs of low blood pressure. One scorching afternoon, while delivering a boxed lunch in South Kensington, I felt my vision blur. My head spun. I staggered into a hallway and collapsed. The box shattered. Then, nothing. I woke up in a public hospital. My whole body ached. A nurse told me I'd fainted from exhaustion, hypoglycemia, and possible signs of a miscarriage. I panicked. She said if I'd arrived a few minutes later, I could have lost the baby. I looked around. No familiar face. No one holding my hand. No one worried for me. I felt the loneliest I'd ever felt. And then, with all the pride I had left shattered, I picked up my phone and called James. My phone was nearly out of battery. I held it in my hand, trembling, hesitating. Should I call or not? I had promised myself I wouldn't rely on anyone, especially not James, the man I once loved but hadn't contacted in 2 long months. But now, I had no choice left. My fingers trembled. The screen lit up with his name. James, the last person who still believed in me. The call connected. Each ring sounded like my heartbeat, loud, frantic, desperate. 1 second, 2. By the 5th, his voice came through the line, gentle but filled with alarm. Emily, is that you? Where are you? I couldn't respond right away. My throat tightened. Tears streamed down uncontrollably. I forced myself to speak. I'm at the hospital. James, I'm pregnant. And I almost lost the baby. There was a sudden noise on his end like he had jumped up. His voice changed, quick and urgent. Which hospital? Don't move, I'm coming. Just stay there, Emily, please. 15 minutes later, the hospital room door flung open. James burst in, eyes bloodshot, breath ragged, shirt wrinkled, hair a mess. He didn't say a word. He just rushed to the bed and grabbed my hand. His hand was warm, firm, and shaking. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? What did the doctors say? I shook my head. Tears fell again, but this time not out of fear, but from relief. For the first time in months, someone held my hand and made me feel like I wasn't a burden. Were you not going to tell me about the pregnancy? I lowered my head. Then everything poured out. The eviction from home, the nights I wandered looking for shelter, juggling 3 jobs a day, eating dry noodles, collapsing on the street. I told him everything, word by word, like tiny knives cutting into old wounds. James sat silently for a long time. Then he stood and squeezed my hand tighter. I'm sorry for not being there sooner, but that's over now. From today, You won't go through this alone anymore. I looked up. His eyes held no anger, no blame, just pain. The kind of pain a man feels watching the woman he loves be torn apart by loneliness, poverty, and betrayal. I'll take care of you and of our baby. But first, you need to know something. James sat on the edge of the bed, holding my hand with both of his. I'm not just a student. I'm not just someone working on a startup project. I'm James West, the son of Charles West, chairman of Westland Holdings. I was speechless. My mouth hung open. Had I heard him wrong? You're an heir? Yes. And I didn't tell you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want our love to be tainted by money or reputation. I needed to know, did you love me or the name behind me? I broke down crying. All those months of starving, working myself to exhaustion, freezing through the night, enduring it all without complaint. Finally, it made sense. I loved him for who he was, not what he had. I love you, no matter who you are. But I was ready to raise this child on my own. I don't need your wealth. I just need you to not abandon us. James held me close, his arms strong and comforting. He whispered in my ear, I will never leave you, and I will never leave our child. From today, everything changes. And it did. That phone call, the one I thought was my final act of desperation, was the beginning of something new. No more fear, no more hiding, just me, James, and our child, stepping into a future I had never dared to dream. When I was discharged from the hospital, I expected James to take me back to his old flat. Instead, he drove us through the wide, clean streets of West London, past rows of townhouses and private gardens, finally pulling up in front of a 3-story mansion draped in ivy and nestled behind wrought iron gates. I stared out the window, stunned. "Where are we?" I asked, barely above a whisper. James stepped out, came around to my side, opened the door, and offered his hand. "Home," he said. "It's time you saw the truth." The inside was like something out of a dream or a movie. Marble floors, towering ceilings, chandeliers like constellations hanging above. Every inch was elegant, curated, intimidating. I had never stepped into a place so vast, so spotless, so drenched in quiet power. I was still trying to process when a middle-aged couple appeared on the grand staircase. The man wore a gray tailored suit, his expression unreadable, the lines on his face carved by decades of leadership. The woman beside him looked regal in a silk dress and pearls, but her eyes, locked on me, were filled with cool scrutiny. James walked over, positioning himself between them and me. "Mum, Dad, this is Emily, the woman I love, and the mother of your grandchild." Silence blanketed the room. The air was thick. The woman tightened her grip on her handbag. Mr. Charles West didn't flinch, but nodded. "Come in. We need to talk." In the sitting room, steaming tea sat untouched on a lacquered table. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I knew this wasn't just a meeting, it was a trial. Finally, Mrs. West spoke, voice smooth, firm. "How long have you known our son?" 2 years, I replied honestly. We met during a startup seminar. Did you know who he was? I shook my head. No, not until recently. Her brows arched slightly. And you claim to be carrying his child? Yes, I'm almost 4 months along. The doctor said I nearly miscarried. Do you think a child is enough to enter this house? Her tone was sharp, like the edge of a blade. My heart trembled, but I straightened my back. I'm not here to demand anything. I'm here to keep my baby, even if I have to walk away alone. The silence was thunderous. Mr. West folded his hands and turned to James. "You're sure?" "Absolutely. I love her, and the child is mine. Whether you approve or not, I will take responsibility." Mrs. West placed her teacup down slowly. "I need time, but I will not accept a rushed marriage." "I don't need a wedding," I said gently. "I just want to be safe and have the father of my child beside me." Mr. West looked between the two of us and his tone softened. "If you're truly not after our wealth, time will reveal that. And if you are, well, that truth has a way of showing itself." There were no hugs, no warm farewells when the meeting ended. But I didn't leave broken-hearted. I hadn't come looking to be accepted as a fairy tale bride. I just needed the truth to be acknowledged. That night, James took me to his private suite on the mansion's second floor. He pulled me into his arms and said softly, "I know today was hard, but from now on, you're not alone anymore." I rested my head against his chest. Worry still lingered, but for the first time, I wasn't abandoned. Living in that mansion wasn't a fairy tale. His mother didn't suddenly welcome me, and his father didn't instantly warm up. But I had crossed the threshold, not with titles, not with power, but with truth. And I knew to survive in this world of influence and scrutiny, I had to prove that I wasn't just the mother of a West heir. I had to show that I was a woman worthy of standing beside the man who carried an empire in his name. Life in the mansion was nothing like a fairy tale. It was beautiful, yes, but behind every glimmering chandelier and polished floor were sharp glances and veiled skepticism, especially from Mrs. Eleanor West, James's mother. From the very first moment I walked through the doors, she made it clear she didn't like me. Her eyes were icy, as precise and cutting as a scalpel. She didn't need harsh words, just a glance, and I understood. "You are not one of us. You are not yet accepted." Mrs. West was the kind of woman who lived by strict discipline and high standards, As the matriarch of a powerful family, she wasn't used to people like me, a girl with no pedigree, no family name, no impressive career, and now pregnant before marriage. Those first days in the mansion were painfully tense. Every meal felt like a silent exam. I sat across from a woman whose every spoon placement made me shrink smaller in my seat. I didn't know what to say or how to behave. She never scolded me outright, but her demeanor screamed, "You're not worthy." One evening, I was washing dishes after dinner, something I was used to doing from my time in the bedsit. She walked into the kitchen, stood behind me for a long moment, and finally spoke. "We have staff for that. You don't need to do chores to win favor." I froze. My hands still in the sink, my heart clenched. "I'm not trying to win anyone over," I said softly. "I'm just used to taking care of myself." She didn't reply. She turned and walked away. But I didn't stop. I continued cleaning, cooking, tutoring math online in the evenings. I didn't want to be seen as a leech. I wanted them to see I wasn't after anyone's wealth. I knew she was watching me. Sometimes when I came home with groceries, I caught her silently observing from the upstairs balcony. Sometimes while I tutored online, she'd pause near the doorway, just long enough to hear a snippet. Her suspicion lingered, but she was paying attention. One chilly evening, I coughed throughout dinner. She said nothing, but the next morning, a bottle of cough syrup sat neatly on my bedside table beside a warm glass of water. But I understood. It was her way of beginning to open up, quietly, stubbornly. A few weeks later, I was making a Vietnamese sour soup in the kitchen. Mrs. West walked in, an extremely rare occurrence. "You're making something sour?" I nodded. "Yes. My mom used to cook this when the weather turned." She paused, then murmured, "My mother used to add pineapple to hers." I smiled. The tension eased just slightly. She was no longer a judge. She was a mother-in-law trying, in her own rigid way, to accept a future daughter-in-law. That night, James pulled me into a hug and whispered, "Mom isn't easy to crack, but she's trying. You're doing wonderfully." I rested my head against his shoulder. For the first time, I looked at Mrs. West's eyes, not as blocks of frost, but as windows slowly defrosting. There was suspicion, still, but there was also a sliver of acceptance. I realized then, love between James and me wasn't the only battle. Earning a place in his world meant proving myself. Through character, not convenience. Through integrity, not inheritance. It all started on what seemed like an ordinary morning. I was in the garden at the back of the mansion, brewing a cup of chamomile tea, when James came running out with his phone in hand, eyes wide in disbelief. "Emily, have you checked the news?" I shook my head. Since moving into the mansion, I'd avoided social media and the news, hoping to stay clear of gossip and scandal. But when he held out his phone, my breath caught in my throat. A major online newspaper splashed across the homepage. "Son of Westland Holdings chairman expecting child. Girlfriend's identity revealed." Below the headline was a photograph, one taken the day I fainted from exhaustion. In it, James cradled me in his arms outside the hospital. I looked pale, unconscious. James's face was tight with worry. The image was raw, vulnerable, painfully honest. The article didn't hold back. It detailed that James was the son of Charles West, heir to a billion-pound real estate empire. His girlfriend, me, was described as ordinary, untraceable, and allegedly pregnant. The comments section was a wildfire. Modern-day Cinderella? What's so special about this girl that caught a West heir's eye? Classic trap. Get pregnant, force marriage, win the jackpot. I froze. I wasn't afraid of gossip. I had lived through worse. But I was terrified that my parents would see the story. I had never told them about James, about the mansion, about the baby they once rejected. That afternoon, my fears materialized. The mansion's security came running to find me, saying 2 strangers were at the gate, crying, asking for me. A man and a woman claiming to be my parents. I went numb. My heart dropped like a stone. I walked slowly toward the front gate, each step heavier than the last. And then I saw them. My father, who once told me I was dead to him, was on his knees at the iron gates. My mother, who stood silent the night I was cast out, was holding my old coat, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood frozen. My father lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot. His voice cracked. "Emily, forgive us. We were wrong. We were blind. We believed strangers instead of our daughter." I didn't know what I felt. Anger, grief, or something sharper, disillusionment. I remembered that rainy night, standing outside our home, belly trembling, face soaked in tears and rain. My mother had watched from the doorway and said nothing. My father had closed the door. And now they stood here, not because I was suffering, but because I was news. Because I was now carrying a West heir. Because my shame had transformed into something valuable. My mother took a step forward, her voice trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to see my grandchild, to hold you for a moment. If you'll let me." I didn't answer. My chest felt like it had been clawed open. I turned my back. I couldn't bear more. James appeared behind me. Silently, he helped my father to his feet. He didn't scold or shame them. He simply said, "Today, let Emily be. When she's ready, she'll open the door." My parents left in silence, leaving behind a long, heavy stillness. Since that photo, I was no longer just an unknown pregnant woman. I had become a symbol, dissected, discussed, loved, and hated by strangers. But I knew that image, that article, had cracked open the part of the past I thought I'd buried. It dragged the truth into light. It forced those who turned their backs to face what they'd done. And it was the only thing that made my parents
finally see what they had lost.
That afternoon, the sky darkened with clouds. A light drizzle began to fall, as if the air itself braced for something heavy. I was sitting by the bedroom window, flipping through my half-finished journal, when the housekeeper rushed in, breathless. "Miss Emily, there are two people outside. They say they're your parents." Her words struck like lightning. I stood abruptly, heart racing. I didn't know how to feel. Fear, anxiety, anger. All I knew was they were here. I walked out to the second-floor balcony and looked down at the courtyard. At the gate, two familiar figures stood. My father was kneeling on the wet stone ground. My mother stood behind him, clutching the old coat I had left behind the day I was thrown out. Raindrops fell steadily on their shoulders, soaking their hair, their clothes, their guilt. I descended the staircase slowly, each step echoing with memories I had tried so hard to forget. When I reached the gate, my father looked up. His eyes were red, his expression no longer cold and rigid but broken. "Emily, my daughter, we were wrong. Your mother and I, we were terribly wrong. Please forgive us." My mother sank to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" I said nothing. My heart clenched. These were the same people who had cast me out without hesitation, who had torn my soul apart with one cruel command. And now, here they were, kneeling before my home, not just in remorse, but because the media had exposed the truth, because they knew I was carrying the heir to a billion-pound empire. "We're not here for money," my father continued. "We're here because we want to hold our daughter again, to apologize face to face. No one else has the right to forgive us, only you." His voice cracked, but I remained silent. The image of that rainy night haunted me. I saw myself, pregnant, suitcase in hand, pleading for a sliver of understanding, and they had chosen pride over love. "I begged for a chance to explain," I said finally. "You chose to believe the whispers and not me. Now what am I to you? A daughter or the future wife of a wealthy heir?" My father bent forward until his head nearly touched the ground. "You have every right to be angry. We don't deserve your forgiveness. But if there's any love left in your heart, don't let us live the rest of our lives with this regret." His words made my chest ache. I turned away, unable to face them any longer. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't ready to forget. James appeared behind me, his hand gently resting on my shoulder. He didn't speak to me, but turned to my parents, helping them up without judgment. "This must be hard, but Emily needs time. Please let her find her peace first." My parents nodded through tears. Just before they turned to leave, my mother placed the coat carefully on the stone pillar by the gate. "You used to wear this when you came home from school late. I kept it because I always believed someday I would need it again. They walked away slowly, rain soaking their fragile forms until they disappeared from sight. I stood there, heart tangled in 1,000 threads. I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive. But in that moment, I knew something had changed. My parents were no longer the ones who had judged and rejected me. They were now the ones who carried the weight of their choices, with nothing left but the hope for redemption. That night, after my parents left the mansion gates, I couldn't sleep. My mind spun wildly between memories and the present. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father on his knees, my mother clutching my coat, their cries echoing like a haunting lullaby. And with those images came the cruel words from the night they disowned me. Get out. You're no longer my daughter. The next morning they returned, this time invited by James. I agreed to meet them, not to forgive, but to say all the things I had kept buried. The sitting room was quiet. I sat at one end of the long table, my belly round, my back straight like armor. My parents sat opposite, eyes lowered as if forced to stare into the mirror of their own regret. I looked directly at them. Why are you here? To truly apologize or to salvage your reputation now that the truth is public? My mother's voice faltered. My father bowed his head. Emily, whatever our reason, we were wrong. We let pride cloud our love. We chose our image over our daughter. I let out a bitter laugh. You cared more about whispers than your own child. You threw me out like trash. No questions, no support. And now you think a few tears and apologies make it right? My mother broke down in quiet sobs. Not the hysterical crying from the day before. This was raw, breathless weeping like a woman realizing she'd lost more than she could ever regain. I don't know what I can do to make it right. I just want to be there when you give birth, to see my grandchild, to try to start over. I turned my face away. My heart clenched. I wanted to scream about every night I went hungry, every job I took while sick, every time I cried alone in a moldy room with a growing belly and no support. But my voice was caught behind a wall of pain. James placed a hand gently on my shoulder, steady and warm. Emily is stronger than anyone I've ever known, but she's not made of stone. She needs time and sincerity. I turned back to them. I forgive you, but I won't forget. The room fell into silence. You can be a part of this child's life, but don't expect things to go back to how they were. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. My father slowly rose, walked toward me, not to embrace, but to speak softly. I understand. I'll try to become someone you can look at again and call dad. My mother approached next. Her hand trembled as she placed it gently on my belly. Tears fell onto my hand, but I didn't pull away. I didn't reach for her either. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a happy reunion. It was the beginning of something new, tentative, fragile, incomplete. I didn't forgive to ease their guilt. I forgave to free myself. I went into labor on a bright March morning. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window as I folded my tiny baby clothes. At first, I thought the contractions were just mild, but they grew stronger, more urgent. I held my belly and called out, my voice shaking, "James, I think it's time." Less than 10 minutes later, I was in the car. James drove carefully, but his face was filled with panic. He glanced at me every few seconds. "Are you okay? We're almost there. Just a little more, Emily. Hang in there." As I was wheeled into the delivery room, my hand was clutching his. My mind was reeling with memories. Those cold nights in that damp motel room, the day I passed out from hunger, the silent tears I cried alone. And now, I was in a world-class hospital with James by my side and both families waiting anxiously outside. The pain came in waves. I screamed, cried, sweat poured from every pore. But through the pain, I felt the movement of life inside me. So close, so real. And when my baby's first cry rang out across the room, I sobbed. A sound so small, yet so powerful. I was becoming a mother. Congratulations, a healthy baby boy, 7 pounds. I trembled as I held the little one close to me. His hand instinctively grasped my finger, fragile but strong. I whispered, "Hello, my love. You are my mother." James stood beside me, his eyes glazed with emotion. He kissed my forehead, then bent down to look at our son. Nam Koi, our son. When we returned to the mansion, everything was ready. A nursery had been carefully prepared. Mrs. West held her grandson for the first time. For the first time, her eyes were no longer cold. She stared at him, her expression softening, then turned to me. "Thank you." Just 2 words. But in them, I heard acceptance, forgiveness, a new beginning. Mr. West came over, put his hand on James's shoulder, and gently patted my back. "You're officially part of this family now." A few days later, my parents came to visit, carrying a bag full of baby craft supplies, fabric, pillows, little shirts my mother had sewn herself. She held her grandson, her hands shaking as if she were cherishing a lost part of her youth. My father stood nearby, his eyes red, whispering, "Koi, huh? What a beautiful name, just like his mother." I didn't answer, but I invited them to stay, not to fix things, but to give my son a chance to know his grandparents. Let the healing begin, not with words, but with actions. James held a small naming ceremony in the garden of the mansion. No media, no extravagance, just family, close friends, and a warm table set under fairy lights. I wore a simple white dress, my hair down, holding my baby, with James by my side. The pride in his eyes, the quiet relief on my parents' faces, and the tenderness in Mrs. West's smile filled me with a peace I had never known. I had crawled through mud, faced rejection, endured heartbreak. But now I stood among blooming roses, surrounded by a real family. Family is more than blood. It's about those who choose to return, those who dare to change, those who love with all they have left. Baby grows every day. Every smile of his became a new chapter in my life. I was no longer the girl abandoned by her parents or the lover humiliated by society. I was the mother of a beautiful child, the wife of a good man, the daughter-in-law finally accepted, and the daughter finally welcomed home. Most importantly, I was me, whole, strong, and never apologetic for living the truth in my heart. Now, I am no longer the scared, lonely, and homebound college student I once was. I am a mother, a wife, an independent woman. I open a free online class for single girls, helping them get up after falling. I tell my story, not to brag, but to let those who have been desperate know that you are not alone. I have learned that. Never judge someone without knowing the truth. Family is a place of love, not of building. A lie can destroy a person's life. And finally, I know that I am not only the blood of a wealthy family, I also have my own character. Life can be cruel, but it is also fair in its own way. It makes me depressed, tears apart all my beliefs, pushes me to the depths of despair, just so I can see what is truly important in this life. I used to believe that family was the safest place, but then that place abandoned me with just one yes. I used to think love was a fragile privilege, but it was that love that pulled me out of the deep space, giving me a new life, not only rich but also meaningful. I used to be the girl called family's sadness, suffocated by the rain and wind far from home, pregnant, penniless. And I survived, not just lived, but lived strongly, lived worthily. I didn't respond. I didn't react violently. I responded to life by waking up, by becoming better, by becoming a proud mother. If there's one thing I want someone who is hurt like me to know, it's this. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. You have the right. You have the right to be weak, but you also have the right to stand up for yourself and for the people you love. Be true to yourself, because the truth, no matter how deep it is, will find a way to be lifted up. I don't resent what happened, because if it weren't for my darkest night, I don't think I would have ever seen the light I see today. Thank you to those who turned away. Because of them, I learned to walk alone. Thank you to those who followed me. Because of them, I learned my true worth. And thank you to myself for not giving up.